right, so I'm here with Emma Donoghue to talk about H is for Hawk, which is now playing in select cities across Canada. Emma, so good to talk with you. For people who haven't heard about the film, what's the movie all about?
It's an extraordinary story about a human animal bond, in that it's about Helen MacDonald, who, when her father died, Helen plunged into taming a goshawk, the fiercest of all the birds of prey. And it's not like any animal movie you've ever seen, I would say. I was trying to think of some comparison, but it's a unique story. And it was such a treat for me as a writer to be able to climb inside somebody else's book. It was like climbing inside Helen MacDonald's extraordinary, expansive brain and poking around there and seeing, how can we translate this to the screen without going for the obvious, big slabs of voiceover. I was determined to do it without voiceover, determined to find like a cinematic equivalent for all MacDonald's brilliant writing.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, that's the thing. It's like, as you said, it's like you've done adaptation before, but it's usually been of your own work, your own novels into the screen. This time it was with Helen's work, and they have a very distinctive voice, and it's so interior and so reflective throughout the entire time. To then bring that to the screen, yeah, you want to avoid having big, massive, narration and everything like that. So what was it about, like, how did you start getting into the nuts and bolts of it? How did you approach finding the way to tell this story cinematically?
Well, Plan B reached out to me, it's 10 years ago now, and I had heard of the book but not read it. And they sent it to me, and I was about 20 pages in, and I thought, okay, first of all, this is almost impossible because this is a book of many genres. It's nature writing, it's cultural history. A lot of it is about another writer, T.H. White, known for the Sword and the Stone books. Only some of it is really MacDonald's own personal grief story. But I knew as a screenplay, we would need to absolutely follow that, her personal story. So I thought the fans are going to hate me, which is a common feeling for anyone adapting a beloved work, and the book has really, really passionate fans out there who feel it's the only thing that got them through their own bereavements. So yeah, I thought the fans are going to kill me, but I have to do this because it's such a good book.
Right.
So first thing I did, as I said, was like, okay, I'm not going to resort to voiceover. And I suppose just staying really, really close to the minutiae and the little beats of the human animal relationship. I knew it wasn't like one I'd read about anywhere. It's not the classic animal on screen story, which is typically like one white boy standing in for the human race and then one animal who has to die to show that we are nasty to nature. It's not that story at all. So I really paid very close attention to the human animal relationship as we see it grow from that first moment when Helen like peers in through a little hole in the box and glimpses Mabel. So it struck me very much as like a parent-child story. It's like bonding with this tiny creature who needs you and is so unpredictable, and you're a mess and your hormones are all out of whack. So yeah, by clinging to that relationship between Helen and Mabel, I think that's what really gave me the spine of it.
Yeah, no, it's a very intimate story, definitely. Was there any point, was the T.H. White ever, if portions of the book ever considered, did you ever go, maybe I should try to fit that in there? Or were you very much like, I really want to focus on this personal story?
Yeah, I never seriously considered it, and nobody tried to change my mind. And actually, I just read an interview with Helen where they were like, I'm so glad that Emma Donoghue stepped in and just sort of decisively cut out the other stuff. The paradox is we've all seen literal adaptations. Okay, a novel I love, The Time Traveler's Wife. I saw the film adaptation and I was like, oh no, you stayed closely beside the book, and so you failed to capture the book's magic. You need to use different techniques on screen. Well, you know this. So sometimes the closest way to capture the spirit of a book is by just leaning into what makes cinema cinema. And in this case, I knew that for everything I cut out, I knew that the visuals, especially of the hawk flying and interacting and, all that almost wildlife footage would really flesh out the story I was telling. So I really had no fear that the bit of the book I was choosing to focus on wouldn't be enough because I knew we'd also have the all the subtleties of the acting too. And once we got Claire Foy, I was like, okay, I can really relax.
No, definitely. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like bring it to a different medium. It totally changes the language on which you tell the story. And yeah, all the pieces are here. Philippa does a great job directing it with these beautiful shots of the hawk and everything like that. And Claire is an amazing performance. But for you, when you were putting the script together, I'm guessing there was a lot of time you had to look at falconry and see how do we tell that story visually?
Absolutely. And in a way, I think what I really had to do was trust that the actual process of taming this hawk would be interesting enough. So, this wasn't a story I was going to cut away from. I really allowed the screenplay to be very myopic, very obsessive, because it's a story of obsession. We've all fallen down rabbit holes, and also leaning into the way in which, it's no quick fix. Taking up this hawk does not immediately change Helen's life in a good way. I mean, you see the Helen in the movie get more and more feral and weird and literally dirty. I remember writing in lots of moments like hawk poos on the floor, bit of dead meat on Helen's jacket. By the way, that waistcoat that Claire wore is Helen Macdonald's actual hawking waistcoat.
Oh,
The
wow.
cameras are her actual dad's cameras. The books on her wall are hers. So almost semi-documentary. Helen allowed us to use a lot of their real stuff, and their family allowed us to use a lot of their real stuff to help make the thing a sort of tribute to the extraordinary photographer that Alistair MacDonald was. So this film has elements that are almost documentary. It's absolutely rooted in the real. And I knew from the start that Helen was totally on board with this project and enthusiastic, and didn't resist any of the changes I needed to make. So it felt like we were really making all these changes in the spirit of making the most powerful film, rather than in some kind of like, generic Hollywood style approach to a book. It just felt
Yeah.
like the changes we need to make.
Yeah, of course. Not changes for the sake of changes, but changes because it helps progress the story. Totally. Now, that's the thing. Yeah, having their involvement like this, Helen's involvement, was that like, it must have been good, like a good experience for you, the fact that they were on board with every change. Is like, this was probably an extremely positive experience.
Was fantastic. I remember in particular having to email Helen and say, can I change something about your brother? I can't even remember what it was now, but you don't usually go messing with the storyline of people's family members. And again, her friends are crucial in the film. That's another reason I didn't need voiceover, actually, is because even though Helen gets like lonely and feral, there are plenty of people like their friend Denise, her sort of hawking mentor Stuart. There are people that she spills to when she's in the film worried about like the hawk not eating enough, and she talks to the hawk. So actually she's very communicative. It's not a story of like some silent monk. So even though those human relationships are kind of under pressure, because sometimes the Helen in the movie doesn't answer the door, but when she does speak, it's very expressively.
Oh yeah, no. It is for a lot of scenes where it's just a person and a hawk. There's a lot of expressions going on in there. Definitely. All like this film doesn't shy away from the emotion that's being felt by the character at all. So for you going through this story and putting this story together that is basically about grief, about coming to terms with the loss of someone extremely important to you, the loss of a father, which of course is brought to the screen beautifully by Brendan Gleeson. Like Brendan Gleeson, great casting because of course everybody automatically loves Brendan Gleeson when you
We'd
see him
all
on screen.
cried to lose Brendan Gleeson, I
Exactly,
agree.
exactly.
And actually, Philippa, the director, who not only directed this beautifully and with a particularly, you know, gentle onset style, by the way, like she never raises her voice. She thanks everybody, celebrates everyone, incredibly mild manner, but really gets every shot she wants. But anyway, she's my co-writer on this, and one thing she really added, I think, is more Brendan Gleeson, basically more memories and more anecdotes. Even I'm not sure they're all in the book. So I think fleshing out Brendan was a crucial part of the process, because otherwise the viewers would be a bit like, well, you lost your dad, most of us do. These things happen. You weren't 2 years old. And so really feeling that loss, and a loss that stands in for anybody's loss. That's the thing. It's not a freakish event. It's just like, oh, my dad died. But making that vivid through the relationship between Helen and Alistair in the movie, I think is turned out to be really crucial, structurally crucial.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, it's all there. As I said, it's very much on the screen. I think you guys did a great job of conveying this story beautifully. You feel it. You feel it, especially, the work that you did, the work that Philip did, and the work that Claire did to bring Helen's story to the screen is, yes, you feel it. You definitely feel it. Now, you yourself, I've heard you say that, you can basically write anywhere. Location situation will not stand in the way you're writing. In fact, there's a video online of you writing beside the bathrooms at a GO station. So, has there ever been a point though that you've been at a place that you're like, oh, I got time, I'm going to start writing, where you've gone like, oh no, wait a second, this environment just is not working for me?
I was once at a beautiful writers' retreat, and I did feel a bit freaked out by how perfectly it was set up as a writer's heaven. All this beauty and so on. And I felt a bit like, I can't think of any great ideas today. I'm probably more comfortable beside the bathroom at the GO station.
Yeah.
To be honest, when I made that video, I was at a GO station. That's realistic enough. But I thought, I'm going to plunk myself down beside the toilets because I really want to demystify the business of being a writer and show, all you need is a piece of paper or a computer, whichever your method is. You don't have to have everything right, because if you have some process that depends on your exquisite fountain pen and your mahogany desk, then you can only write on the days that you're at home. And I like to go out in the world, So a day like today, when I'm doing publicity in Toronto, I'm going to be writing on the Via train. I've written even in parked cars. There's no day that can't be a writing day. And also, I also always remember Jane Austen, who, she never said no to her visitor. If visitors came in, she would just put a cushion over her book that she was writing. And you can tell from the books that they are all the richer for the fact that she let those visitors in,
Yeah.
So I don't think writers have to be sealed off from the world.
Totally. But you can't tell that she put a cushion over it. You can't, from those books, you can't read and be like, oh, someone would put a cushion over this writing. No, definitely not. But is it like, even when you're not writing, are you writing though? Is there times where you like thinking up an entire chapter or a moment in your head before you sit down? Or are you someone that is like, when I sit down to write, that's when I write?
No, I'm a big planner rather than a pantser. And the pantsers always sound cooler. It's not fair. They're always like, oh, I got this mystical vision. I have no idea how it ends. And I'm impressed by their skills, but I don't understand them because I need to plan to make a good story. So I do get a literary insomnia where in the middle of the night my brain is just buzzing. On my phone, I would have on my notes app, I would have notes on at least 20 different works. I've had ideas sometimes when crossing a road, and as soon as I get to the other side, I write them in my phone. Often misspelled, by the way. So years later, I'm like, what was that brilliant idea? I can't quite understand the words now. But yeah, I write everything down, keep everything, because also some projects don't happen, right? There are books that, for instance, are about things that are too dark and depressing even for me. But that idea might turn up in something else. Again, there are film projects I've worked on that don't get made. That's how it is in film. Film is so expensive, but every project teaches you something. The funny thing about H's for Hawk is that it's really turned me on to birds, because when I think that I got approached to write it back in 2016, and since then I wrote a novel set on an Irish island in the 7th century, where really much of the interaction is between humans and seabirds. My next novel is about pigeons. H is for Hawk just sort of opened me up to the entire world of birds and how interesting they are, how different from us, how they see things differently, and how they inhabit this, upper realm that we don't get to live in. And yeah, I think I didn't routinely read wildlife books before this one, but this one just, touched my imagination like nothing else had.
Wow, so it opened a whole new world for you. That's amazing. Now, you did just mention that your next book is about a pigeon. It's coming out in spring of 2027. Now, you are known for writing historical fiction, but this takes place in 2040?
It's true, but my best known one, Room, is contemporary. So I've always
True.
toggled between the past and the present. I really don't see a distinction. If I want to write a good story, no matter where or when, I'll follow it. I'm very sort of confident as a writer in that I'm always my mindset is always of the beginner, who knows nothing, but I'm sure I can find out. So yeah, I can't go into detail about the pigeon one yet, but it's great fun to try new things, such as say a near future novel. Just as taking on a film project about something you know nothing about, like Hawks, again, it puts you in that sort of beginner mindset, which is much better than feeling like, oh, I know it all already. You want to
No, of
just
course.
keep setting yourself fresh challenges.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. That way you always be learning. Definitely. That's very good advice to have. Totally. Well, I look forward to people getting to check out H for Hawk, which is playing in select Canadian cities. As I said, really such a personal story, and I think the entire team that put this together really captured the personal nature of it. It feels very intimate. The viewer feels like they are going through this grief with Helen. So, thank you so much for talking with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.